Validating model data in an ASP .NET Core API. Model validation ensures that the incoming data to an API is correct, preventing invalid or malicious data from being processed. ASP .NET Core provides built-in validation mechanisms using data annotations, fluent validation, and custom validation. 1. Validation using data annotations. Built-in validation. Data annotations are attributes applied to model properties to enforce validation rules. Example: applying data annotations. As shown below, this code defines validation rules for the user class using data annotations in C#. Here's a brief explanation of each validation attribute. Required. Ensures that a property must have a value. Example: name, email, and age cannot be null or empty. String length, 50. Limits the length of name to a maximum of 50 characters. Email address. Ensures email follows a valid email format. Range 18-60. Ensures age is between 18 and 60. Regular expression. Adds $0 to $9, $10. Ensures phone number contains exactly 10 digits. How it works. Required. Ensures the field is not empty. String length. Limits the number of characters. Email address. Ensures a valid email format. Range. Ensures the value falls within a defined range. Regular expression. Enforces a pattern for phone numbers. Validation in controller. ASP .NET Core automatically validates models using model state. Is valid. In below code, receiving user input. The from body, user parameter binds the incoming JSON request body to the user model. Model validation. When the request is received, ASP .NET Core automatically validates the user model based on the data annotations, e.g., required, string length, email address, defined in the user class. Checking validation. Model state is valid checks if all validation rules are met. If valid, it proceeds to return a success message, 200 OK. If invalid, it returns a 400 bad request response along with the validation errors. 2. Fluent validation, more advanced and flexible. Fluent validation is a popular alternative to data annotations, offering more control over validation rules. Step 1. Install Fluent Validation Package. Run the following command in the terminal. .NET add package Fluent Validation, ASP.NET Core. Step 2. Create a validator class. Using Fluent Validation. Rule for user equals user.name. Ensures name is not empty, not empty. Limits it to a maximum of 50 characters, maximum length 50. Rule for user equals user.email. Ensures email is not empty, not empty. Validates it as a proper email format, email address. Rule for user equals user.age. Ensures age is between 18 and 60, inclusive between 18-60. Rule for user equals user.phone number. Validates phone number using a regex to ensure it is exactly 10 digits, matches, adds $0 to $9, $10. Step 3. Register Fluent Validation in Program. CS. Builder services.add controllers. Add Fluent Validation. FV equals FV. Register validate is from assembly containing user validator. Step 4. Validation in controller. No need for manual validation. Fluent validation automatically validates the request body. If validation fails, ASP.NET Core automatically returns a 400 bad request with validation errors. 3. Custom validation for complex scenarios. For scenarios that require custom logic, you can create a custom validation attribute. Step 1. Create a custom validation attribute. FutureDate attribute class. Inherits from validation attribute to create a custom validator. Is valid method. Checks if the value is a date time. If the date is not in the future, i.e., date equals date time now, it returns a validation error, date must be in the future. If the date is valid, it returns validation result, success. Step 2. Apply the custom attribute in the model. Required on name. Ensures that the name field cannot be null or empty. Future date on event date. Uses a custom validation attribute, future date attribute, to ensure event date is a future date. Step 3. Controller. Model state is valid check. Ensures the event model passes all validation rules required for name and future date for event date. If invalid, returns 400 bad request with validation errors. Successful case, 200 OK. If valid, returns a success response. For handling validation errors globally, global exception handling. Instead of checking model state is valid in every controller, you can centralize error handling. Step 1. Create a middleware for handling validation errors. Below custom middleware in ASP, NetCore handles validation failures in HTTP requests. How it works. Stores the request body before processing. Calls the next middleware in the pipeline, await_next context. Checks if the response status is 400 bad request, indicating validation failure. Modifies the response to return a JSON object with message, validation failed. Errors, retrieved from context items, errors. Example response on validation failure. Message, validation failed. Errors, name, the name field is required. This middleware ensures consistent error responses for validation failures across the application. Step 2. Register middleware in program. CS. App, use middleware, validation middleware. 5. Validation in API filters, alternative approach. ASP. NetCore allows you to use action filters for validation. Step 1. Create a custom validation filter. This action filter ensures that model validation errors are handled before executing a controller action. How it works. Runs before the action executes, on action executing. Checks if model state is invalid. If invalid, it stops execution and returns a 400 bad request response with validation errors. Example response on validation failure. Name, the name field is required. Event date, date must be in the future. This filter ensures that only valid requests reach the controller, improving API reliability. Step 2. Apply to controller. Validate model filter. Applies the custom validate model filter action filter. If model state is invalid, the filter returns a 400 bad request with validation errors before reaching create user. If valid, it returns a 200 OK with user created successfully. 6. Response when validation fails. When a request fails validation, ASP NetCore automatically returns a 400 bad request response with details. Example response. Conclusion. Data annotations. Quick and easy but limited. Fluent validation. More flexible and recommended for large applications. Custom validation. Best for advanced scenarios. Middleware/filters. Useful for handling validation globally.